Hi, I'm Jill from KiteCo and we are back with another pattern. This is our sander sling. Now, sling crossbody. Crossbodies, slings. Now, this is the first in our series of beginner bag making patterns. Now, I don't mean beginner sewing, that's a whole different video. This is a beginner bag making pattern. So I've kept the instructions as simple as possible. Now, if you're a confident beginner or an advanced sewer, you might find the instructions a little bit basic, but the pattern is in no way basic and is a great blank canvas for any creativity once you've got some more skills to dress it up and add some more stuff to it. So let's have a look. Pocket on the front. Flap is optional and it looks quite cool without the flap as well. A lot of my testers did it that way. This one simply has the D-ring tabs at the back and the sling has the sling option coming out the back with a bar along the bottom so that you can adjust your sling from side to side. Inside you've got your choice of credit card pockets or simple slip pocket. And as you can see, even though it's a little bag, with the zip method we're using, it's got a wide opening at the top. So you don't have any overhang with a zipper tab and there is no anything that gets in the way of your zip opening. So this is the bag I'm going to make for the tutorial. I did make this one and the video went kaput. So I've done another one and this is the tutorial bag. So as you can see, medium and small. Perfect for sublimation prints or these really cool patterned vinyls and things that we're seeing at the moment. So that is our new pattern and I'm really excited. It's in the shop now. Now, if this is the first time to my channel, please give me a subscribe and a thumbs up because it does help us out. But what I'd like to do now is talk about the cutting chart a little bit. Let's get a couple of these out of the way, shall we? This is a tutorial, and as such, I just want to go through that as basically as possible. So this pattern has a full cutting chart, and it gives you instructions on what to cut for which individual options you choose. Now, all styles are separated off, the optional flap is separated off, and they're all in sections. The sizes are also separated into a colour for the sizes for the medium is separate to the small. So I had one of my testers ask what is fraying fabric and what is non-fraying fabric. Well, a non-fraying fabric is like leather, vinyl, cork. It doesn't come apart when it's cut and you can't pull it to bits. Whereas a fraying fabric, and of course I've probably picked one here, comes to pieces. Look at that, it's not going to come to pieces. See, the pieces come off when it's left raw. So of course you don't want that on a strap if it's just left like that because you're going to see all these pieces and with wear they're going to come off. So this is why I've asked for non-fray for your pocket trim. But if you're using cotton or something that does fray, the only difference in the pattern that's going to make is one pattern piece. So for the crossbody, it's pattern piece G. For the sling, it's pattern piece H. And I'll show you the difference. This is the full pattern piece. So if you've got a fraying fabric like cotton, you would cut it at the full pattern piece. If you've got a non-fraying fabric, you would fold the pattern piece on the line as instructed and cut it at that size. And how to handle each of those steps is very clearly outlined. You would fold it in like that for the folded, so you've got, for the fraying, so you've got a double fold. And for a fraying fabric, you simply fold it in like that and leave it like that. So that is it basically in a nutshell. So I am using this vinyl today, and so I have cut a half piece. But let's go through the tutorial now. Grab your pattern and why not sew along with me. So I do talk about fabric types in the cutting chart quite a bit. Basically, if you're using a cotton, like a quilting cotton or a canvas or something lighter, then you may want to use interfacing as well as Decavol Light, which I strongly recommend. I have actually interfaced my vinyl because it's very thin, and I have put the Decavol Light over the top of my interfacing. It's just a very stretchy light vinyl, but I love the colour. So that's my two body pieces. Now the pieces for the stabilizer are included as extra pattern pieces. We've got the top for the body, again that has deckable light out of the seam allowances, and our D-ring tab, as I mentioned. Now that doesn't have anything on it at this stage because I will be putting deckable light on it when we make that up. So then I've got my pocket. Now I have used a sublimated print. Now I have interfaced that, and I've also got my lining which I've interfaced. I've also transferred the little dot for where the magnetic snap is going to go for my pocket because I am doing the flap, and that will be the flap over the top. So again, I've transferred the mark to my lining, but the measurements are also there in the pattern. I have kept the deckable light out of all seam allowances, and on this I have just interfaced out of the seam allowance. That's not really necessary. I just only had a heavyweight interfacing left. So this is our lining pieces. Now our lining piece is shaped to give you a nice snug fit in your bag, because I don't like anything baggy, never mind my bag linings. So then we have our slip pockets. Now I'm using both in this bag, and as you can see I've interfaced half of it. If I've had a lightweight interfacing, I would do the whole pocket. So that's our main pieces. I've also got my strap, which I have interfaced. Now I use quite a lot of webbing for my straps. I think it's quite cool, but on here I'm following along with the pattern. You will also need a zip, a size 5 zip. Now for the small you could probably get away with a size 3. But do cut it exactly at the length required for the pattern, and don't be tempted to trim it down at any stage. It's part of the construction, the way the zip is left. You will also need a couple of D-rings for the size of you're making. Now I have 1 inch on the medium, but I'm actually cutting it down to 3/4 of an inch today because I'm running out of hardware and I'm waiting for a shipment to turn up. So I've got my D-ring swivels and my adjustable slider, my bag tag, and I'm using a 13mm magnetic snap. Now I wouldn't go anything bigger than that on a bag this size, but I've also used those dome snaps on a small version of this too, or you could use that on the big one. And I'm using a little handbag zipper pull, which I kind of look like. And I've got all these fancy zipper pulls on my website and I don't use them, so I thought I'm going to start using them. Okay, let's get into making this. So we're going to start with our pocket. So what we're going to do next is put our bag tag on and also put the marks and cuts for the magnetic snap. So what I'm going to use for those is my ruler, some scissors to cut the deckable light, a marking pen, a knife. Now I use this tape to put at the back of my prongs. It's an electrician's tape, but it's really nice and sticky, and some glue to glue my deckable light on. So what we'll do is we will just have the exterior of our pocket. We'll fold that in half, put that on our board because we want to come up 30mm or 1 1/4 inches to the bottom of our tag, and there's my centre line right there. So I line that up with my centre line, and my prongs go through that hole, so that's how you know where to cut your slits. Now I did have a little penknife, but I can't find it, so I've got to be careful with this because it's very easy to go too far. And of course I forgot to put the deckable light on. So I've just got a little scrap here that I'm going to put in behind it just to give it a bit of extra strength. Put some glue on that. Bend my prongs. See if I can see my cuts from here. Probably not, so I'll cut this through a bit, because now of course I've so I can see where they are. There and there. And my prongs is bent funny. You can just push that over the top. And of course the glue will hold it all down. Sure. Now you can put your prongs any way you want. I like mine to go to the outside. make sure it's straight. And I put a piece of this tape over the back, because you don't want your prongs pushing through onto your fabric line. So while I'm here, I'm also going to mark for my snap. Now the pattern tells you how far to come down for that. So for on the pocket, you can either mark it off your pattern piece like I have, line the center of your little washer up with the dot, and cut your little prongs. Now while we're here, we may as well do our pocket lining. Again, I have marked mine from the pattern piece, and in the pattern it says how far down it needs to be from the top on this one, and this one gives you a measurement from the bottom. So again, I'm going to put a bit of Decavol light on the back. I think I'll cut that around a bit so it's not all ugly. So can I see that through? I'll just poke a hole in it. There it is. Now we are not fitting this at this stage, we are just cutting them. So and you'll see why once we start doing it. Put a hole through that so I can see it on the other side. Now I did have another scrap of Decavol light. I'd hate to have a bag ruined because the snap or your name tag came through the outside. I like to do a test fit just to make sure it's going to fit, because we're going to do this inside the pocket. Yep, that's going to work. I mean, that one doesn't go there, but it shows us our prongs are right. So what we're going to do now is we want our pocket and our pocket lining. We want to put them right sides together. Now I'm putting a clip here because I'm going to sew to there. Now you can put a mark because we want to leave a turning gap. So we're going to start here, sew down that end and along to the turning gap, jump to here, along to there and up to the top. We then want to start here, come on a straight line down there, and then pivot to start coming around the corner, come to here. So if you draw a straight line down both sides, you then can just sew up to that straight line. So we're doing all this at a 6mm seam allowance. So because I'm doing the flap, I'm going to do these at the same time. So I'll clip again, right sides together, exterior and lining, just like our pocket. Clip those in place. This time we are going to sew down there, around and back to the top. We're not going to sew along the very top, so just down, around and back. Again at a 6mm or 1/4 inch seam allowance. So they're all sewn, and as you can see, we want to come down straight and then across. It's easier to see with the seam in it. So what I want to do now is take our scissors and cut just into that notch. Don't actually cut the thread, just cut it to it. We'll cut your corners off. As you can see, I forgot to leave my bottom open, so I need to go back and open it up. So I just round those off a little bit, so there's not too much at the corners. Now we don't need to cut that one off, but what I do here, you can either trim that just with scissors, but I like to use my pinking shears if you've got any available, and just come in around that notch. Now not too close, and just to where we've cut, like that. And the same on our pocket flap, if you're using the pocket flap. Cut the corners off. So as you can see, I've come in close, but not too close to the seam. So now we want to turn those through. Now what I do is I put my finger right on the corner and my finger on the corner in the other side, so I can just push it straight through like that. Now if you're using a fabric you can press, it's nice to give that a press. Now I'm going to clip that back a little bit because I don't like to have, when I've got such an obvious lining, I don't want too much peek through at the side. Now on some of my bags I like to leave a bit of peek through because it actually looks quite nice. See this here, for example, I wanted to have a bit of peek through so that it was a feature on the pocket. It almost looks like piping, but if you've got too much of a texture, you may not want to have too much showing through. So make sure that's pulled well back when you stitch or when you iron it. You can actually just run your finger along it like that and give it a press along the edge so it pulls it in. Now this is the fun one, especially when I've added 2 layers of fairly rigid interfacing. So again, I put my finger in my pocket and push out the corner. I'm loving this print. It's one I bought off Etsy, this sublimation print. And it goes with so much stuff. Get your finger as far in there as you can and push it through. And this is one of the benefits if you've used lighter fabric that you will appreciate. It's a bit of a push to get that out. With such a small bag, I wanted the biggest pocket opening you could get. So there you go. Now give that a good roll and it tends to separate that out. So what we're going to do now is top stitch down there and around the curve and back to the top, making sure that that's definitely kept as a peak or a straight line. And on our flap we're going to come down the edge, around the bottom and back up the other side. So we'll go top stitch those at a 3mm or 1/8 of an inch, but I like to be a little bit generous, so maybe just over 3mm or 1/8. So what we're going to do is fit our snap before we go any further. So you want your female on this side. Put that in your holes that you had before. And open it so you can see the back. Put your washer on. Now these ones are really stiff, which is good because we don't want them coming out. And a bit of tape again on the back. find another roll of this stuff. It's really handy. So that's your female portion, and your male portion goes on your lining only. So get your fingers in there behind the deckerville that you put in before. Now this is a little bit tighter. Get your fingers in there to put the back on and push down your prongs. So that, when that's on there, lines up with your pocket like that. And it sits just within the gap. So what we want to do now is keep rolling out these edges and turn this under. Something about your lining being cotton, you get frays and things. Okay. It is inevitable that you're going to get a little bit of peek through, but you can try and minimize as much as you like. So I either minimize or encourage depending on what my lining contrast is. See, if I had purple lining, I would definitely be encouraging peek through. Okay. So now we're going to get our front, which is just one of our bodies. It doesn't really matter which, they're both the same. Now we're going to line that up at the top, and it is 1 inch from each edge. 1 each, or about 25 millimeters. So put a clip in there. One-inch rulers are handy. Looks about right. A little bit far in. Okay. And we want to keep that level all the way down. Now you can put a very fine piece of double-sided tape down the edge, but then you would be sewing through it, so it depends on whether your machine can handle that or not. So what I tend to do is, as I'm sewing down this side, I take my ruler and just check it, and then if that's right, by the time you get across, that's going to be right. So we're going to sew that in place. So I start down here, go along there and up the top, and if I'm using the flap, I then come along as I've finished and baste along the top. So we'll go sew down there, along and up, and if you're using the flap, then baste the flap. So I'm sewing this at less than 1/8 of an inch, so about 2 mil. You want to be fairly close to the edge of the pocket, but enough to give it good security on the bag. So that's our pocket sewn around the edge, and as I said, you're inevitably going to get a little bit of peek through, and I have sewn the flap. So now what we want to do is take a B top. Now this is curved, so you want to keep the curve at the top. So lay it right sides together with the flat edge against the flat edge of the top. So I clip at both sides because it tends to pull against the flap. And clip along the top. And we're going to sew along there at 10 mil or 3/8 of an inch. So we're sewing there. Now what we simply want to do is turn that up like that. Put a clip on each side. and flatten that down. Now keep the seam lying towards the top. Now we want to top stitch down there at a generous 3mm or generous 1/8. So that completes our front with flap. So obviously you don't need to have a flap, but that is the version with the flap. So we'll put that to one side for now. So now we've got to move on to our D-ring tab. Now I have got a piece of Deckerville Light that I have cut. So I'm just going to put that, I've got a bit of double-sided tape on the back of it. Just going to put that down the middle. And use another bit of double-sided tape. I normally glue my Deckerville Light on there, but I had a bit with tape on it, so I thought I'd just use that. And pushing it into, yeah. I do say to use a 12mm strip, and I've used a thick strip. A thick strip. Can't even speak English. So you can kind of push it in towards it and then push it down, and it kind of fills up the gap. Of course that end is all yucky. So that is our D-ring tabs, and as I said, I'm using 3/4 inch instead of 1 inch, so just check it's going to go through your D-ring tabs. So what I'm going to do now is stitch down either edge of this, or top stitch down here at a generous 3mm or 1/8 of an inch. Trim my end, not that it matters. So we want to cut that in half. Slide a D-ring into them, now making sure the join is on the inside. Like that. Now if you want to, you can put a rivet in there to keep it together. In fact, I might do a little rivet there. I'm going to be adding a rivet at the bottom, so it can be quite nice if you've got a double rivet. So as you can see, I've put a rivet in mine, just at the top, because we're going to get our back now. And we want a silver marking pen, or a pen that you can mark on vinyl with, or whatever you're using, without it showing up later or disappearing. So we're wanting to come in from each edge 1 1/4 inches. So 1 1/4 or 30mm. So 30mm or 1 1/4. And we want to mark on here 5/8. So 5/8 or 15mm. So we're going to line those with that line in line with that, and the edge in line with our mark on the side, just like that. So again, lining up our line that way, and our edge should be sitting on the other mark. And it's a good idea to baste those in place. Now we take our other back, top back, and again, remember it is got a curve slightly on one end. We want the flat edge right side together, lining up the edges or the ends. Now I tend to put a clip either side because it tends to push it away a little bit. So bring a clip right into there and a clip in the middle. So what I'm going to do is sew along there at a 10mm or 3/8 of an inch. But keep in mind that these are quite thick, so if you're on a domestic be careful and hold them with a owl or something like that, just to make sure that your machine is going to feed it through. All my clips at the sewing machine. Okay, so that's all sewn. Now what we want to do, this is different from the other side. We want to flip that all over. So this time our seam is going down towards the bottom, and we're going to be top stitching on the bottom. Now yes, I know that's different to what we did before, but that's the plan, so that we don't get any bulk at the side. So now we want to top stitch down this edge here with the seam lying down towards the bottom at a generous 1/8 or just generous 3 mil. So what I do now is I add a rivet, if you were using rivets, in the middle there. So I'm going to eyeball that completely crooked. My hole punch. Yep, that went right through. Now obviously if you haven't got rivets you won't be doing this. This is my workout for the day. These stay on the floor. If you're using rivets, you just want your shaft to be just through the back. You don't want it too long, else it may not do its job, may not seal properly or grab properly. Make sure that's in the cradle at the bottom. So what some of my testers have done is sewn a box, if they're not using rivets, is sewn a box to meet with their top stitching there around and back up, and done a little cross in it, and that looks quite cool. And the reason we're adding extra strength there and leaving that there is because that's where your bag's going to be pulling its weight from. But at the end of the day, you've got this, but I still would leave that underneath if you haven't got anything to reinforce it. So that's our back. So we've got our front and our back. So we'll put those aside for now. So next we're going to work on our pockets and our lining. So we'll need our linings, any pockets we're using, our pocket trims, and some double-sided tape. So we're on some double-sided tape down the middle of each trim if you're using two. So we'll fold these inside right sides together and just put a clip at the top. Now if you're not using the pocket trim, what I suggest is folding your pocket like this, sew down and across to the middle, and the same on the other side. Turn your pocket through and close it like we did the pocket before. But using the trim, we want to sew down each side only. Leave the top open. So we're just going down each side of those at 6 mil seam allowance. So now we want to fold them in. I don't do any trimming, I don't snip the corners. What I do here is I fold that over and just push it through with my fingernail. So fold it over and push it through. Same with this side. Push that over and push it through, so it gives you a nice 90-degree turn on your pocket. As long as you've got it, your finger right in there. Like that. Now again, if you've got your iron handy, you can press these. So we'll just baste along the top of each of those. So if you're not familiar with basting, it's basically just a longer stitch and just to hold it in place instead of clips. So now we're going to get the thing is it stays in place whereas clips don't. Okay, so get your pocket that you're not having stick to you and just lay it on there just shy of halfway, because we want to pull this over so that it meets perfectly, and of course some of the vinyl is going to be taken up with the turn. So you can use vinyl, leather, cork, anything that doesn't fray at the edges so that it stays and going to keep a nice line like that. So it doesn't have to match your bag, it can be something quite funky on the inside. Even a bit of bias binding will work here as well if you haven't got anything else. So again, fold it over, line up the edges nice and neatly. So what I do, I like the interface side to be the front of my pocket. So that's going to be that side. Now we're going to sew along there. Now start just on the pocket. Don't start out here because we're going to trim that off. So start there and come to the very edge of the pocket there. And we're going to do that at just on the edge. So less than 3 mil or less than 1/8 of an inch. So you see, with basting the pocket and using the double-sided tape, we get a really nice finish. Now just cut up the side of your pocket. Keep your scissors exactly in line with your pocket because you don't want to cut off the top of your pocket. And that's why we've got stitching just to the end, because then we're not cutting off our end of our stitching. Now if you want to seal these ends a bit, take a lighter and just give a really quick, if you've got any threads. Now always hold your fabric away from your lighter if you're going to do that. You can see where the flame is. So there are our pockets. Now this one is going to be a credit card pocket, and that is going to be just a slip pocket. So we want to fold the credit card pocket in half. Now you can just draw this on here, but I like to fold. And you can see where your line is. So there's our line from there to there. So we're just going to draw a line down there. You can hardly see that, can you? And there's a shadow from the light that I can't see what I'm doing. That's okay. So we're going to take our pockets. It's good to find the middles of our pockets. In bag making we tend to mark the middles of everything. I've been a bit lazy today. I haven't been. I normally mark my bag pieces, all the middles, when I cut them. And it's a good practice to get into. Because if you've sewn something off slightly or cut something a bit askew, then at least it's always going to look level because you're lining everything up. Right, and then I can line my mark up with that. Now we want to come down 1 3/8 from the very middle. So 1 3/8 to there. I'll just grab some pins. Now I'm using fabric for my lining I can put pins into. If you're not, you might want to find some other way of holding it, or even just putting a couple of long clips from the side. So then check 1.5, slightly that way. Maybe it's just that I pulled it. 1.5. Yep, that's fine. So what we're going to do for this pocket is sew down to there, along to the middle, pivot up that line turn around completely and come back down the same line till we meet our seam at the bottom. Pivot, turn around, down here, and then back up to the top. Now at the top, do back stitch a couple of times or even do a little triangle off the side. Now in bigger bags, I always put a rivet at the top, but there's not a lot of room in this little bag, so we're not going to on this bag. So again, we're going to come down the 1 3/8 from the middle. So I should still fold it in half, shouldn't I, and line it up with my middle line. That's my line. Now this measurement down is not set in stone. You don't have to have it exactly here. This is just a good depth down from the top of the bag to be able to get things in and out the pocket and not have to dig too deep down. But if you wanted to have an overhang for a bit of a phone, you could put it down there or do a deeper pocket for a phone if you wish. Right, so what we're going to do now is just sew down there, along and back up to the top on that one. So let's go sew those. So that one is down, back and up, and the other one's just around. So at this stage we have got our back, our front, and our 2 pockets. We will prepare our zip. So the measurement for the zip is clearly outlined in the pattern. So we want to take just split it open a little bit. Get your finger here and turn that down. So you're just putting the finger in behind and a finger there and just bringing down that at a 90-degree angle. So you want that to come to the point there. Not difficult, just turn it down like that. Now there's many ways you can secure this. You can melt it, you can tack it, you can just get a needle and thread and do that. Sometimes it's just easier to do that and do the same on the other side. Anyway, all done. So we wanted to make a mark from the left hand side of our front. Now we want to come in 20 mils or 3/4 of an inch. So 3/4 of an inch to there. Now only on that one side, and we want to do the same from the right side on the back. So 3/4 of an inch is there. So then we want to get our double-sided tape, line it up with the edge of that mark, so exactly on that mark, and run it along the curve. Now I'm using 3 mil or 1/8 of an inch because it sits nicely on the curve, and we're going to attach our zip to that. So do the same on this one. So right on the line and along the edge of your curve. And of course your D-rings or your sling tab, if you have got the sling tab, will be in your way, so you need to pull that down at the back if you're doing the sling. So we'll just put our back to one side. And we'll also need a lining. Now decide which you want at the front to be in the front of the bag. I quite like if on my credit card slots at the front, if you're doing 2. If you're doing 1, you can decide whether you want it, which one you want where. So take our zip, lie it, take the tape off our, now line it up the edge of our teeth right on that mark. So you can see where my mark is and where the teeth are. So you want to line it up on the other side, so make sure that the zip, that's fine, because this piece here is what we're wanting to line up, not if you've got an overhang. So tape that and just run that along on the curve. Now I like to put 3 or 4 clips in place. So then we're wanting to line our lining right side together with our bag. Line up the corners or the edge. These clips are noisy. And at this end, move that over, line it up so that they both meet on both sides. And then I just include it in my clips. Make sure that it doesn't drop or move. So you want to just sew along there at a generous 6mm. Now I'm on industrial at the moment, so I just come in as close as I can with my foot. So if you want to use a zipper foot and get in closer, by all means do that. But be very careful that this does not drop, so that your zipper teeth stays exactly where it is. So you might want to put some pressure on with an awl or a stiletto to hold that in place as you're stitching. So now we simply want to move that up. So now we just move that up, keep the zip and keep everything else the way it was. So this is the way we sewed it. Just move the lining up out the way. Make sure the seam stays down at the back. So it's down at the back. We want to stitch down here less than 1/8 of an inch, so less than 3mm. So, and because this is a curve, you want to gently move these out as you stitch, just so that you can keep your curve nice. Don't pull it really tight off your zip, but just once you get to there, you want to make sure that the middle piece is actually open. Now this isn't actually our final top stitch for the bag. This is purely to give you a really nice fold along that curve, because when you bring your zip up and fold it like that, that always stays perfectly down, and so you get a really nice curve on the top of your bag. So now we want to get our back. Lie it so you've got right sides together. And when you've got these in your way, it gets a little bit tricky to get this on. So you're wanting to take the tape off. And again, line your teeth up with your mark. And push it onto your tape. Right, so it's all flat against my tape. Just put some clips in there to hold it in place. That 3mm tape is really strong, it's brilliant. Now again, right sides together and lining up our end. So line up your end. And then simply include it in the clips underneath. Don't let the D-rings push it down. And again, we want to make sure our zip stays there. Now this can be a bit tricky, having to hold the D-rings down at the back. So again, we want to sew down the seam at a generous 6 or a generous 1/4 inch. A little bit closer if you can, depending on your machine foot. And again, as you're sewing, hold your zipper foot. In fact, with a zip, I hold all the way along as I'm sewing, because it tends to pull out. So I just hold it like that as I'm sewing along, just to give you a really nice seam. Again, just open up our lining like we did before and stitch along that edge there at less than 1/8 of an inch or less than 3mm, just along the edge like that. So again, it is just the seam. Don't have the exterior in there. So that's all sewn in there. I did a boo-boo and sewed the wrong seam together first. We need to put our exteriors together and our linings together. And we don't sew that seam first, we do our bottom. I'm so used to doing the little pouch that I do like this that I got into auto mode. Right, So that's our bottom. We're going to sew between the notches at 10mm or 3/8 of an inch. So now we want to rip our zip open and flatten the seam out. So with it out flat underneath, so just check it's flat, we want to sew down either side of that with a generous 3 or a generous 1/8 of an inch, and just keep these folded in, but make sure that stays flat as you're sewing. And that's your seam all butterflied. I love a butterflied seam when it's stitched open. I think that's awesome. Okay, so what you want to do is now put this back together. So we're putting linings together and exterior together as well, and working on the seam that does not have the zipper overlay, or the zipper overhang, sorry. So we've got zipper overhanging this side. So clip those. So now we want to pay special attention to these seams here. Those two should line up, and those two should nest. So one is going one way and one is going the other, and it makes the seam sit so much flatter. So put a clip either side of those and clip in again. So I'm going to sew down between the two notches at 10mm or 3/8 of an inch. Okay, so that's all sewn in place. Now this seam here, we want that to be butterflied or open inside, so I just like to give it a bit of a fold over at this point. Makes it easier later on. So what we wanted to do now is open that up with that butterflied, to get your hand in there, and you want to turn it over so that seam lies flat. So again, so that seam is open at that point. So what you do again is make some marks, and this time we're coming in 3/4 of an inch again from the end. So 3/4 of an inch. Now only use a pen that you know you can get off, because this is on the outside of your bag. So that's 3/4 of an inch or 20mm from each end. Put a clip in there. Keep that in my seam allowance because it does tend to mark the outside of the vinyl. Now we're wanting to top stitch along here. So you do have that at the top, but because we're stitching at a generous 3, it'll form a nice double stitch on the inside. Keep these out the way, and as you come across here, if you're on a domestic, just be careful sewing along that. It's a little bit thick with your zipper teeth, and keep it well pulled down at the front and back. So we're sewing between the notches. So we're starting at that notch and sewing down. So we're starting there, sewing all the way along to this notch, holding these or your sling tab if you've made the sling, because that will be in the way. So at a generous 3mm or generous 1/8. So that's all sewn. Now I do wipe my marks off because I don't want it marking up anything else, because that stuff doesn't always come off when it's dried. Okay, so now we want to put our zipper pull on. So I recommend leaving it this way to put it on. If you put it on, like, or turn the bag inside out to do it, you just have to turn it all back again the other way. So make sure it lines up. And I suggest pulling it on all the way just to make sure you haven't got any major overhang and have to make an adjustment. Right, see, I think I want that side to be a bit longer. So I'll put that back on again. And it does need to be exactly level. And I didn't do it level. Right, that should be fine. See, so when it's shut, it's level. Right, leave your zip open at least halfway. And then take this corner here and just pull it back over the bag. So again, you've got the linings right side together and the exterior right side together. So what I want you to do is push the zipper teeth towards the exterior. So fold it in half at that point and put a clip right there. So you're pinching your zip together and you're putting a clip on it, and then clip that in place just to hold it together. Going to need to melt my zipper end again, I think. Now line up these. Actually, it needs to be the other side because we're going to be sewing from this side. And clip up the side. So if you pull that out, it's definitely you're going to be able to get a clip in there. Clip from the bottom. Line up those seams like we did on the other side, so that one's going one way and one the other, and they meet nice and evenly. Because the pocket's in the way there, it's tending to push it down. So hold it together and work your clips down. Believe it or not, our bag is nearly finished. Actually, I've done that on the wrong side. You need to clip it on that side, this side, because you're always going to be sewing from the bottom. So you're sewing from the bottom to there and from the bottom to there, because we're not going to sew over our zipper teeth. Hold that together. Right, so we're going to start with our lining, and we want you to stitch up here at 10 mils. Now, or 3/8 of an inch. When you get to here, keep sewing until you're onto the zipper tape. Don't push it to get too far because we do not want to sew over our zipper tape. So we're sort of coming to the first seam if we can, if not the second at the max. Keep your zipper tape level that way. Don't let it fall over flat to get closer. So we're sewing from here to that point there at a 10 mil or 3/8 of an inch. Then we're going to turn it over and do the same. So from there, this time just getting as close as we can to the zipper teeth, keeping them straight up and down. And then obviously we need to backstitch both well at the top on both ends. So that's at 10 mil or 3/8 of an inch. Alright, so they're both sewn. Now, don't worry about this gap. Yes, there is a gap. That's okay. It's meant to be like that. So don't try and stitch it from anywhere else to try and fix the gap, because it's not broken. That's the way it needs to be. So I'm just going to melt my end of my zipper tape really well. Now you can just clip the corners off that just a little bit if you want to. But that is all. Don't do anything else with the zip. And if you do that, melt it really well. Okay, so now we want to do the very edge of our bottom. So we're stitching along here to about there. So just because we want to turn the bag through that point. So just clip there and there. So we're just sewing a little bit on either side at the same seam allowance here. 10 mil or 3/8 of an inch. Okay, so this is our bag pretty much done. So what we want to do now is reach in here to get a hole in here. So we're basically lying that seam on top of that seam, pinching at the corners, and if you get you can see it like it's on a diamond, and if you get your fingers there and there, you can feel that it's at the right place. And so put a clip on that side and a clip on that side. Now the good thing about this is you can open the seam and see that it's actually lining up in line with that seam, which you can't do on the other side. So what I want you to do is lie one seam one way and one the other. So you've got one seam that way and one that. So what I'd like you to do is put that down on a mat. Now it needs to almost be off the edge of the table. Because we're wanting to draw a line at the 12 mil mark. So if you can get your ruler in there and hold it. See, I'm going to have the camera in my way. So I'm wanting to come into about there. Oops, of course I moved it. So I'm wanting to sew along that line. We'll do the same on the other side. You can feel when it's in the right place. And again, seam one way. Now make sure this seam lies the same way on both of them. Again, lie it down on the mat. Now you can just sew along it, like put a mark there and there. But if you draw a line, then it's going to stay exactly where you want it, or your seam is going to be where you want. But it's easy to go off because you've got to start up here and line with there, and so it's just easier to draw a line. Sew along the line there and along the line there, and make sure you backstitch well at either side. So as you can see, that's directly at a cross with that, so it's in the right angle. Now I just trim the very ends off. I don't like to come in too far. Some people will trim it off completely, but I don't want to lose my stitching. So I'm just sort of taking the very edge off it. So that's our lining done. Now come to this edge of your bag. Open up your seam and push it down, and you see those seams naturally want to come together like that. And again, put your fingers in, you can feel when it's in the right place. And you can kind of see where it's so that's where I'm going to be sewing, and make sure that that seam is butterflied open like that one. So the seams are going to be open on both sides. And again there, so if you just push down, they will naturally want to come together, but because your pocket's a bit thicker on that side, and put your fingers there and there, bring that up. So that feels a little bit off, I can tell that feels, right, that's better. There's my line. Now because of our variance in our seam, or if we haven't sewn it perfectly, you can get a bit of a where it's not perfectly even, and that's why we want to make sure that those seams line up. So we want to sew along or across the lines on both of those as well. So as you can see, I've sewn 2 rows of stitching about 1/8 of an inch apart. Now that's just to give it a bit of reinforcing, and it's called a reinforcement stitch. So when you pull it through, if you're using vinyl or anything like that, it doesn't pull on the seams so that you're not seeing bits of thread in your seams where you shouldn't be. Okay, so now the fun part. We need to turn this through. So I stick my hand in the bottom of the bag, open up my zip, and just get my hand into where I can push those inwards. So I leave that pushing in. Actually, I usually put it that way. Push it in so that the corners are going in. Like that. Then I just start working the bag, pushing the bag in. So as I'm doing it, I tend to try and open those seams. Now if you've made this small and you've used a thicker vinyl or something, this can be quite tricky. The medium is definitely easier to turn. This is the best time to make sure your seams are open. It doesn't really matter, but it does sit nicer in the bag if they are down. So this is where your flap and your bag and tag and everything can start getting caught, so make sure they're not caught. I know the temptation is just to pull it, but it is much better just to slowly fold it in on itself. Whew, okay, so put your hand in through the bag and push out your corners. Make sure everything's all flat in the way it's meant to be. Okay. Make sure the zip is sitting down in the bag, and then just gently push your fingers up into that corner so it creates a V. So while we've got our corners out, I fold those upwards and bend that like that. I fold that up on the side and fold it in half so that it can come over like that. Fold it in the middle. So you can either sew along here by hand. In fact, it's probably quicker to sew along by hand than it is to change the cotton on my machine. If you're using a matching cotton, just sew along it anyway. And so what you do is you just sew from there along the very edge, making sure you catch both seams. So that's our lining done. I'm just going to melt the edges. Just give that a very quick zap. Now while you've got this out, you can give that a good press if you want to, and make sure it's all flat, which does look nice when you've given your lining a press. Now with the medium you can get both hands in there and push it out. Smooth it down. And as you can see, the lining fits really well. I'll just zap that cotton. And that way we get this really nice V on our zip. And that is our crossbody. So now we want to get our strap. And this tape and me are not friends. Oh, isn't it always the way? Oh, you're starting at the other end. Right. Push that down onto the tape. So I'm just going either side of the line, and I'll do that on the other side as well. So you've just got maybe a mil separating them, just the thickness of the line. Just gives you a neater edge if you've got a bit of a gap. And it looks quite cool. Fold that in half. Now you can use another piece of tape, but I don't want to have another piece of tape in my strap. So you can either clip it all the way along or just bring it together as you sew it, which is what I tend to do normally. So I'm going to go like that and sew along both ends at a generous 1/8 or 3 mil. So that is our 3/4 inch strap. So that's our strap finished. As you can see, I've just put 2 rivets through each piece. Now what I've also done is wrap a single layer of vinyl around the edge, like we did with our pocket trim. Now if you're using a fabric that frays, like a cotton or a canvas or something like that, a denim, you can do the same on the end of your strap. Just wrap a little tiny bit like the pocket trim around the raw edges. So we should put that on our bag. So that is our sander crossbody. This is the medium. 2 slots for credit cards. Bit late to do anything about those now if they don't fit, but cards fit in there. Slip pocket in the back and full pocket.